I'm going to call the Board of State and Community Corrections meeting to order and welcome you all here. I appreciate your attendance. We seem to have ample reasons to meet in 2020 and 2021, and this one is important to all of us, which is to work hard on our strategic plan. There is some news, and I think we sent this out to board members for members of the public who might be here today. Chief Seal will not be attending this strategic planning meeting because he has resigned from the board and taken a position as the executive officer for the Superior Court in the county of Sacramento, which is big news to all of us. I see Chief Zuniga nodding her head to all of us last week. I mean, that was quite a change. We will acknowledge him at our Bscc meeting on June 10th, but just to let you know, he's not absent without cause. He's absent because he's really gone. So we will miss him and all of his input. In terms of logistics on this meeting, we're going to begin with board discussion of our strategic plan, updating it and working hard on our new goals for, believe it or not, 2022 through 2026. And after that, we will call for public comment. So I'm going to ask Adam, as always, to give us some instructions on how to make comments later in this meeting and how to get in the queue for comments. So Adam, you want to take just a minute?
Yes, Chair Penner. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating today. You will have 2 minutes for your public comment at the end of the meeting. Participants who wish to make a public comment, please email publiccomment@bscc.ca.gov with your name. And this information is available on our homepage as well. You can also use the raise hand feature on your Zoom application. If you are calling by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, and I will call out the phone number you dialed in with. To unmute, if you're calling by phone, dial *6. We will lower your hand once your name is received. Madam Chair, that concludes my instructions.
All right, and we'll move quickly to Executive Director Howard to give us an overview of the day and how we're going to approach this subject matter.
Okay, Madam Chair, thank you. I would like to ask Adam Lewin to take the role and establish a quorum.
Oh, I apologize. Good idea, Adam. That's not your job, Katie. You're supposed to say, Linda, you forgot to call roll. Thank you.
All right, Chair Penner.
Present.
Miss Allison is absent today. Mr. Vera Rosa.
Present.
Mr. Groudon.
Here.
Mr. Gore.
Present.
Ms. Zuniga.
Present.
Mr. Barranco.
Here.
Mr. Mills will join us later in the meeting. And Mr. Budnick is absent today. Mr. Steinhardt.
He's on
mute.
That took a while. I am here.
And Ms. Kumpion.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, Katie, I'm going to reboot number 2.0.
Try that again.
Go,
Thank
Katie.
you so much. I'm going to give just a couple of opening comments about the structure for our day, and then we are going to have, I think, a pretty interesting opening panel with our 3 longest serving board members. But before we get into that, I just wanted to welcome you all and thank you, board members, for being here. This strategic planning session was a meeting that we needed to add to our calendar. So we certainly noticed that when we don't have, sort of a whole year in advance for people to block out the time, it's a little bit harder to get everyone here, but I do appreciate we have the majority of our board members present. And then the unexpected change with Chief Seal. So I just wanted to start with a reminder that our work today is a really important part of the strategic planning process. And there will be ample opportunity for the board members who were not able to attend today to review and give additional input into the work that we accomplished today. The division directors are on the call with us today. Yvonne Garner over training, Allison Ganter over inspections. John Prince is on the camera. John's been very involved in the planning of this strategic planning workshop today. And of course, John is over our construction division, Ricardo Goodridge over grants, and Anita Butler over our admin, including HR and IT. So if I would like to welcome our executive team members to raise their hands or jump into the conversation if they have thoughts and ideas to add, and also to let board members know that you should feel free to ask questions if there are any concerns or considerations that come up with respect to some of the specific operations of the board. And that's a great reminder to also say, however, today is a day that we're talking about strategic plan goals. So to the greatest extent possible, the team and I will try to remind us to keep the altitude of the discussion quite high. We don't want to get down into the weeds of the day-to-day operations, but rather, what are our strategic goals at that big picture, high altitude level? Because after all, that's the purpose of strategic planning. It's a process to document and establish the long-term direction of our organization. And we do that by assessing both where we are and where we want to go. So you can think of a strategic plan as a roadmap. And I want to remind you that a good strategic planning process is flexible and inclusive of discussions that encourage new ideas and thoughts. As an organization, we want to be nimble and open and able to adapt to new changes and challenges. This strategic planning effort, like any other, involves a team effort among board members and Bscc staff, as well as with our stakeholders and the public at large, and the people of California who we serve. With that as background, we have solicited some input from our staff and the public and the management team. John will get into that a little bit later in the meeting. And we're taking our existing strategic plan as a point of departure to get input and your thoughts about what the changes to that strategic plan, what the strategic plan goals should be. Also, please keep in mind that we need goals to be realistic. We want to keep in mind what the Bscc's responsibilities and authority are when we are developing and redefining the goals. As I mentioned, to get our conversation started today, we've asked our longest serving board members, Chair Linda Penner, David Steinhardt, and Sheriff Dean Groudon, to kick off with a panel that I'm going to moderate. The questions very generally are going to be, where have we been? Where are we now, and where do we want to go? Now, to the other board members who are here today, just to sort of manage the time, we'd like to ask you to jot down your thoughts and questions as they may come up during the panel, and then we'll weave those into the conversation later. We think this will probably take between 10 and 15 minutes for the opening panel. So turning to that now, are there any questions about the process for today? We'll take you through step by step as we go through. All right, looks like we're ready for the opening panel. Chair Penner, if you would start us off, please. The Bscc was reorganized in 2012, both in terms of the board membership being revised and updated, and with new responsibilities added to the, including new responsibilities connected to the implementation of public safety realignment. How have you seen the focus of the work of the board change over the last nearly 8 years that you have been the chair? Linda, you're on mute.
Well, I can tell you we ended up on Zoom. I would never have imagined that 8 years ago. But as I begin to make comments on the history of the Bscc since 2012, I want to highlight that the executives on the board have been a constant since that time. And I think that has been very helpful to the board as they faced some real changes in dynamics. And that is that we've had to work very hard for inclusivity and transparency. And prior to this, when I sat on CSA, CSA is what it used to be called, a lot of our work was done in a bit of a vacuum. I apologize, they're doing some work. Can you hear that in the background? Still okay. Hopefully it won't get too much louder. I think we primarily worked with counties in the inception of the Bscc, and we have gradually gotten a much broader group of stakeholders and individuals that we work with. I think those are all really positive changes. And I think with those broader stakeholders, we have created a better product. And the board meetings are much more interactive, and the issues we deal with are very intense and valuable for our state as a whole. So I think we've come a long way expanding not just the product we put out, but the number of people we consider as we move the board's agenda forward.
Katie, you're on mute.
Thank you. Everybody takes a turn. All right, thanks. Mr. Steinhardt, you've been supportive of the inclusive stakeholder process that Linda was just describing and that the Bscc has used and improved upon over the last several years. What are your insights about that process and how it connects to today's conversation?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on the panel. And Dean and Linda and I are the seniors here. And, you know, I go back, I was looking at some history. I was on standards revisions panels for juvenile justice back at the Board of Corrections in the 1990s.
Wow.
So I do have a long perspective on this. And Linda, you're right. Business in the old days was done behind a closed curtain, so much more so than today. You know, we have just exploded in terms of community participation and all of the pathways for input that Bscc has set up. And this is statutory. I can think of no other justice agency in California that has a statutory mandate that stakeholders be included in its decision-making process. So it's not just because we're nice guys, we're implementing a statutory mandate that is almost unparalleled in terms of other agencies. So I've been very pleased to see the grant-making executive steering committees populated with service providers, lawyer advocates, behavioral health specialists, doctors, and formerly incarcerated people, and so on. And really, this has been quite an effort to expand the recruitment and to make sure those committees are representative as they are. The standards revisions committees, likewise, I was very proud of our juvenile facility standards revision committee in 2019 for the perspectives that were involved. And in terms of public comment, just volumes of information is coming into Bscc now through different pathways on the website, in listening sessions, and at the meetings. These meetings in 2012 were in a little motel room, sort of, over at the old Bscc. And there were 10 or 20 people there. Now we have hundreds of people commenting directly and by remote. You know, with more public comment comes the opportunity for more negativity. And we have had our share and continue to get our share of criticism. And I've even had to defend the board against various criticisms dominated by law enforcement, not enforcing the standards, whatever, in conversations with lawmakers. And I've always pointed back to the stakeholder model as one that we can't substitute for. So, you know, some people want to move stuff out of Bscc to other places, but what other place has this stakeholder inclusion model? So we need to reaffirm that inclusion goal in the planning process, make sure that all the doors to public comment remain open and look at what those are. And I think we maybe want to talk some more about how to deal with points of dissatisfaction or mistrust that come to us in public comment. What's our best response?
Outstanding, David. I want to mention that John Prince and our colleague Tanya Parker-Mashburn have been really instrumental in all of the planning and execution of today's event. So Tanya will be our primary note taker. And I just want to capture some of the wording that Mr. Steinhardt just, I might have already forgotten it, but you talked about maintaining a focus on inclusivity and addressing ways to respond to criticism. I thought those were two great thoughts to just kind of capture as we're taking notes throughout. And I also want to welcome Chief Mills. So glad you were able to be here at the beginning. Good to see you on screen. Thanks, Andy. All right, so Sheriff Groudon, as an elected sheriff and a long-serving board member, what observations would you make about this "where have we been" question?
Sorry, I
There we
hit the wrong button.
go.
No, well, thank you. And thank you for having me on the panel. It's hard to believe it's been as long as it has, but like Dave and Linda said, I mean, the most glaring difference now is we get a lot more attention, the board does, but we also are a lot more inclusive in every function, everything we do. So that has been a real positive change. From my perspective as a sheriff, you know, I grew up in a sheriff's office, worked custody and at multiple ranks. And I run a local detention facility now. I can say that the core functions of the Bscc remain important to the counties, and specifically the sheriffs and probation chiefs and our staff. We really rely on the inspections and realistically the technical assistance and advice we get from our field reps on a regular basis. So the Bscc field reps, they help us ensure that we are running a safe and efficient facility. Sheriffs and chiefs we do take the inspections very seriously. Sometimes we hear questions related to the relationships between Bscc staff and our staff, or it is implied that they're too cozy or friendly with law enforcement. And I just don't see that. You know, but our staff, they have to trust that they're getting good advice from their field reps. And when we see an issue arise, we don't wait for the inspection. You know, if it's something that we can't resolve ourselves, we reach out in short order, because our field reps, one thing we really appreciate is their expertise and experience. And they learn a lot when they're going through the variety of facilities that they inspect around the state, and that knowledge that they bring has been invaluable to our staff. So I think that's one thing obviously the inspections are important, but one thing that we have to recognize is that ongoing advice and support, that we can receive from our field reps is invaluable. And I think it helps us head off issues early on before they become an inspection related issue. So when it comes to the inspections, the standards are clear. The inspectors are professional people, and when they do those on-site inspections, if you're deficient, you're deficient, and they're going to include that in their report. And we, me personally, and I know I'm sure the sheriffs and the chiefs feel the same. We want to identify those deficiencies so we can address them. Come up with plans to address those. So we want the field staff to include every deficiency. And then also they'll help us often with advice on how we can come into compliance. Bscc staff have been working on this last year and providing much more information to the board, us as a board, and the public about inspection results is also a step in the right direction. Now unrelated to inspections, I think we've made some real progress, like Dave said, in the area of grants and training. We don't talk much about the training, but that's an area, we want to continue to see improvements in our local detention facilities, whether adult or juvenile. We've got to maintain that focus on training. And just one example of something I think that was real positive on the post side of law enforcement training, there's a lot of focus on advanced training for facility administrators. And a couple of years ago, we worked with our Bscc staff, the American Jail Association, and the State Sheriff's Association to start the Jail Command Academy. It's sort of filled a gap, I think, bringing experts from around the nation together to provide training to our local, jail and facility administrators. That's just one positive change I've seen in that training area. Sorry to take so much time.
That's great. No, appreciate it very much. Thanks, Sheriff. Moving to part two, where are we now? I will ask you, Chair Penner, to pick up on what Sheriff Groudon was talking about on inspections. Back in January 2020, Governor Newsom directed us to strengthen the state's oversight of county jails. And then the pandemic hit. So we faced a number of challenges in the last year. But how do you think that strengthening of the oversight of county jails is going, and what more needs to be done? Linda, you're muted.
I apologize for that. It's a great question. And let me start by saying the Bscc, under 3 prior names, has been charged with the obligation of inspecting jails and juvenile facilities since way back in 1940, which is a good piece of data to keep in mind as we sort of incrementally go through the many changes that we've made since we were established. I can tell you the governor's extremely interested in our jail inspections, juvenile hall inspections, and what we're doing. And that increased in attention from both the administration and the advocate and families of individuals incarcerated, I welcome. I think all of us want to make sure that we're doing the right thing when we restrict somebody's freedom and incarcerate them. I think we all understand that we have to be accountable to what we're doing as we perform those duties that we're charged with. We've talked about in the recent board meetings how the pandemic has brought even greater attention to deficiencies or responses because of the pandemic. And I think while it's not the most comfortable situation to be in, as we feel like we're slightly defensive, we are open and interested in tackling the problems that we're advised of, as well as the ones we find through our inspection process. And beyond that, as Sheriff Groudon said, you know, we want to partner with our other stakeholders in terms of providing technical advice, so we don't allow things to get to crisis proportions, while we incrementally improve, change, and move forward repeatedly. And I think some of the positive that's come with, you know, the new charges and, you know, sort of being clear on what our authority is, that we have been open and tried to react to criticism. And then the downside of that is there have been a number of occasions where the criticism of the board has been incorrect and frankly off base. And we have tried to continue the conversation, come back and say, well, we found differently, and this is what we've established. And I guess we have to continue to work through those difficult dialogues. At the end of the day, I think we come out with positive outcomes. We're moving agendas, and the advocates, the families, the elected sheriffs, the appointed chief probation officers, and the Bscc all have the same ultimate goal, and that is safe facilities, doing the right thing, and providing accountability in a humane, safe environment for both people incarcerated and our staff that serves in those facilities. So, you know, we're moving. It's not fast, but it's not static either. And I'm really proud of the work we've done.
Thank you, Chair Penner. Sheriff Groudon, what are your thoughts about where we are now?
All right, so I'm not going to focus much on, you know, the COVID or the pandemic, but obviously this last year has been extremely challenging for a lot of us, and we've had to, I know in my agency, we've had to put aside a lot of plans and other things just to adapt to the pandemic. But overall, you know, even though despite the challenges, the pandemic has made us better in a lot of ways. But I am glad that obviously that we're doing better now in terms of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So clearly that, you know, there's a significant increase in the scrutiny of law enforcement and corrections. You know, that's evidence, you know, we see evidence of that every day in the media, and obviously the involvement with the Bscc I think the need to focus on improving our current systems is clear. But when we talk about that, I think it's important to recognize some of the accomplishments we've already made and some of the challenges we still face. Since 2011, the county, specifically sheriffs and probation chiefs, have been working to support the goals of realignment. The issues faced have been many, but the biggest has been the biggest issue we've seen in the adult facility is just the shift of those long-term offenders into our custody. So despite the challenges, though, we've made a lot of improvements in our local systems. And that, it's important to remember that was a key part of realignment, was that local control, that the locals would be more efficient in addressing the needs of their, offender population. And I think we have to remember that. And I know in my local jurisdiction, at one point we just warehouse people. And now we have, a variety of systems and alternatives incarceration available for people that come into our custody. Really, the only people that stay in jail are there on very serious charges. And we've done a lot better job at improving outcomes for our local offender population. So I think it's important to recognize, some of those changes that have been implemented that are in place now. And as far as inspections go, I really think the enhanced inspection process that we're using now, obviously I interact with sheriffs around the state on a regular basis. I get calls from facility administrators. I'm just asking for advice on a variety of things. And I know I just know from talking to some people, there are some agencies who have historically had a high number of areas of non-compliance. And I think part of it's the scrutiny over the facilities. Part of it is this enhanced inspection process. A lot of agencies are making a concerted effort to address those areas. And I have one local example. Our safety cell, when our facility was built, about 30 years ago, was built they didn't accommodate for the full or account for the full thickness of the foam padding in the room. So it's about a ½ inch too narrow, the room. And we've been out of compliance for, 30 years. But with this new process, I was able to leverage our board to put up the money to make a modification to that. And we're working our way through it. Those plant related deficiencies take time because we're working on them through the engineering process right now. But that's just one example from my own facility of an area of long-term non-compliance that we're going to be able to bring into compliance now. So I think that has been a benefit too. So thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Mr. Steinhardt, turning to a topic that you have been very involved in the last couple of years, and that is DJJ realignment. How does that effort tie to our strategic planning conversation?
Well, first of all, I would say that Bscc's juvenile justice role has always been a very mixed bag. California does not have an independent and separate juvenile justice department like so many other states. Rather, we've always split juvenile justice operations at the state level between different agencies: Bscc, CDCR, DJJ, HHS, DOJ, and so on. Everybody's got a piece of the pie. And Bscc has had mainly facility standards, county facility standards, and grant making as their prime juvenile justice functions. So those will change under realignment. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, you just have to acknowledge that California is in a transformational era of juvenile justice reform. And we are not alone. From the US Supreme Court, forget about the most recent decision, right down to the states, juvenile justice is not looking like it used to, pulling back on adult prosecutions, trimming delinquency jurisdiction, funding new alternatives to incarceration, and so on. And so DJJ realignment fits into this reform era and mode by shutting down a central state youth prison system in California and moving those cases closer to home at the county level. And there are lots of goals around realignment that take into account a kind of youth development model. Senate Bill 823 was adopted last year and calls for the Division of Juvenile Justice to close intake in 2 months and to close permanently in 2023. And Bscc is involved in SB 823. And so our planning process is going to have to take those changes into account. The first big change, and probably the biggest one, is that all juvenile justice grants now at Bscc will move to a new HHS Office of Youth and Community Restoration by 2025. So we've got some planning to do around that conversion. In fact, the major DJJ realignment grant will start out at Health and Human Services and not at Bscc. Juvenile facility standards stay at Bscc, and they are just hugely important. Frankly, I'm glad that they're staying here for now. I think we've done a great job in the last round of modernizing those standards. But a challenge ahead is that we have to revise those standards under the realignment bill for new local secure track facilities that are going to accept local commitments of kids who used to go in DJJ at these higher offense levels. They're going to be older, up to age 25. They're going to stay longer. So how does Bscc devise a new set of standards for juvenile halls, camps, and ranches that are holding a whole new population under redefined circumstances? That is a challenge. And those standards, by the way, have to be concurred in by the new OICR office. So there's a kind of cross-government function there as well. So these are really strong implementation challenges. Our planning process has to take into account the sort of conversion of some of these Bscc juvenile justice functions. And I would say, just from a goals perspective, we really should look holistically at Bscc's total juvenile justice role as to the state, as to counties. It's changing. Pieces of it are moving. It's not sitting still. What is the future of our juvenile committees? What do we have to do to adapt to these changes? And how can we help, as Dean has pointed out, how can we actually help local governments do the right thing under realignment? So that's a key challenge ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Chair Penner, in recent months, the Legislative Analyst's Office produced a report called A Review, a review of state standards and inspections for local detention facilities. And then earlier this month, the Department of Finance released a proposal to add 14 new positions to the Bscc so that we can conduct more frequent inspections and provide more detailed information about our inspections. Also, the administration is proposing a statutory change for Bscc inspectors to be given the authority to conduct some of our inspections unannounced. Then last month, the state auditor released a report called Public Safety Realignment: Weak State and County Oversight Does Not Ensure That Funds Are Spent Effectively. In today's strategic planning session, how do you think those reports should be considered?
Well, they're timely. Let's start with that. As we begin to look at our strategic plan, it's great to have both these reports at our fingertips, and the LAO, to begin with, raises attention to the policy issues associated with the Bscc and our authority, and what do we have the right to do when we go out on an inspection. And the legislature will have to make a decision, what they would like us to do. I mean, they can create Inspector General's office here at the Bscc, and we can go out and have the authority to close facilities should they deem that be the way that we should appropriately handle our obligations. But that would create a number of changes to statutes and a great deal of authority, and actually more staff than I think we can calculate at this juncture. If they think we should do that, I think this agency is up for that challenge. But I think really in the near future, the more reasonable approach is the path that we're on, adding staff, doing more frequent inspections to ensure compliance on a more regular basis, and to bring out of compliance states back, counties and detention facilities back before the board for this enhanced process, and continue expanding our technical assistance we give to various counties. So our spring finance letter is encouraging for the appropriate approach at this juncture, unless the legislature sees it differently. I think the unannounced inspections fit very well into this expanded staffing. And as I said to the sheriffs when I spoke to them in a conference setting last month, anybody that runs a facility in the state of California and it leads large agency wants all the information they can get. And sheriffs are individuals at the top of an agency, and if somebody comes in and inspects and they find deficiencies as a result of an unannounced inspections, they'll welcome the information, they'll react, and they'll do whatever has to be done. Just as Sheriff Groudon shared with us earlier, when they get deficiencies, notices from our inspection staff, it's a tool utilized to make better situations in facility by facility. We think the LAO membership recommendations will be heard by the legislature. I think that is something that we as members of the board will wait and see what happens rather than to make recommendations for what should occur. And I don't know what the outcome of that will be. In terms of the audit report, it's a pretty quick answer in my estimation. We simply don't understand what they were talking about and in terms of their recommendations. We disagree that we would be monitoring all the sub-accounts for the very large package of realignment funding way back in 2011. That was never the intention. I happened to be sitting at the table as a chief in Fresno at that time, and I can tell you, I'm still confounded on how the audit report came out the way that it came out. So we'll just have to, I think, as a board, take a wait and see on that. We haven't heard much more about it since its release, and I suspect we won't. But if we do, we're going to continue to say we don't agree with the findings and we think they're off base.
Thank you, Chair Penner. Sheriff Groudon, if you have thoughts to add on either of those two recent reports or other current issues on this question of where do we want to go?
All right. So from my inspection or my perspective, I do appreciate the move towards more inspections. I do think, you know, the main, it's important for everyone to understand the primary inspection that's occurring every 2 years right now is very intensive for both our staff and the Bscc staff. There's a lot of work that, because we have a wide range of inspections that happen on an annual or biannual basis, you know, fire inspection, you know, public health inspection. There's just a number of inspections that already occur, and we have to have all that information, gather all that information for the Bscc field rep. So I don't think it would be realistic to do that intensive inspection more than once every 2 years. But I think what you do, you add the other inspection or inspections that really focus on like areas of historic non-compliance, because traditionally that's what happens. I mean, that's what I've seen in my career. You know, if we have a issue in one area, we adapt and try to address it, but that's most likely this, and most of them have to do with staffing or logging, things like that. It has to do with, you know, human error or other issues. But have that field rep come back and do those additional inspections on those areas of either traditional non-compliance for that specific facility or areas that, you know, are commonly where facilities are commonly found to be out of compliance. But I don't think we're going to have enough staff, and it would be a real burden on us to do those intensive inspections more often. But I do think the focused inspections will reach the goal that we're after. And in the end, the facilities will get more information and technical assistance, and the public will get more information about the jail operations. I want to make a comment on the work that locals have done to be responsive during the pandemic. You know, we're now reporting the Bscc every week on COVID cases and facility populations. And obviously we've already had an enormous workload increase just with all the other action plans we've implemented in our facilities to protect our staff and the offender population. And I think it is important, and I want to acknowledge the hard work in the field and here with our Bscc staff in support of that. And there's been a lot of focus on inspections, but I'm hoping later today we'll focus on how we can maintain and improve our work from the perspective of all the other parts of the Bscc operation also. We have talked a lot on this panel about inspections again, but we also are responsible for training and a wide variety of grants, facility construction and research, and so on. And just a couple of quick examples from me, like on grants. One thing I've seen, I've sat as the chair on many ESCs and grant programs, and I think it'd be nice to explore options, because what we find is the same counties who have resources end up being the ones successful time after time. And oftentimes we do set aside pools for the smaller counties to address their needs. But what we find is that they don't have the local expertise either to write a competitive proposal or even just, to implement new programs. So that's an area where I have a personal interest, where I think we can make some improvements. And I think on the jail profile survey, I know that's come up at times, but I think we can recraft it to more accurately describe what's happening in our jails currently. So with that, I'll finish. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Good ideas there, Sheriff. Mr. Steinhardt, if you would wrap it up for us by adding your thoughts on where this board might want to go. David, you're on mute.
Thanks. Thanks. I do agree with Linda that much of the criticism coming the board's way is misguided or misplaced, in the sense that we're being asked to do things that are beyond the scope of our statutory authority. It's really that simple. It comes from the heart. It's all well intended. We listen. We wish we could do more, but we can't unless the legislature and the administration change the mission and change the enforcement power of the board. I wrote down here that people think of Bscc as the enforcement gunboat that sails into counties, is going to set everything right. But we are really a boat without guns when it comes to enforcement. And that's just the way that it is. So if that changes, we will be a different agency. In the meantime, there is this question, and it's a strategic planning question. What can we do within the boundaries that we do have? So one of my questions is, can we look at the standards and the framework for the minimum standards as they come up for revision and change those or alter those in ways that are more related to outcomes for people who are detained? So many of our standards are, do you have a written policy around this, or do you have a policy around that? And it's hard, and so you inspect to the policy, not to what's on the ground. So I've always thought that we could do more in terms of how the standards are articulated, more about outcomes, less about how they're written up. The other question is, as enforcement becomes a hotter issue and an ongoing issue, what is our role as a board in relating to the legislators and administrators who are considering this? We've always been hands-off in these discussions, or relatively hands-off. There are discussions that take place, but I just wonder how the board, there's so many experts on the board, people with on-the-ground experience, and if there's a way for us to relate to the process of change at the policy level. So those thoughts. Some discrete areas where I think, again, within our existing mandates that we could maybe improve in. It's already been mentioned, technical assistance. Some years ago, Bscc produced, for example, a white paper on youth with mental health disorders in juvenile facilities and summarized best practice standards. I mean, that was eons ago. We have done a lot like that. So in terms of being proactive on the policy front, or just in terms of best practices, there's certainly more that we could do. Of course, that's a resource-bound question as well, but it is an area that invites maybe more activity. Data collection, Dean mentioned the jail survey. One of the unfinished pieces of business here is the juvenile detention profile survey, which we all acknowledge is behind the 8 ball and not up to date. We don't even collect local detention data on juveniles by race and ethnicity, as if that isn't an issue. So there's no resistance really to doing that work, but it just hasn't been done. Inspections are, of course, an ongoing work in progress. I do want to just very briefly, an anecdote around inspections. I looked in my files, in 1992, Governor Wilson recommended and the legislature acted to terminate California Youth Authority inspections of juvenile facilities. And we substituted self-certification by counties. As long as the county said they were in compliance with the standards, that was it for a while.
Because of a budget crisis, right, David?
Crisis, right.
Yeah.
But it created a kind of an uproar. And I remember, I don't know what, we put up examples that horse racing had better oversight or something like that.
No, brother.
We do come from a place where we've been, down at the bottom, and now we're talking about the frontier of enforcement in a total, and standards in a totally different way. So I don't have, I did hear Dean's comments about grants and the problems for small counties in responding. I think I would love to, I endorse discussing that. Much of it's guided by the legislature when they write up the grants, but it's been an ongoing issue in our discussions and we shouldn't let it go. And then of course, the big elephant in the room is the makeup of Bscc. I mean, you could ask, we do a 5-year plan and the board gets remade and its mission gets restated. And so what happened to the 5-year plan? That's an interesting question. So that's really in the province of the legislature to address. But I think our job is to make sure that we are aligned with best practices and modern standards and do the best job we can in terms of inspections and the other things that ensure the safety and well-being of persons in custody. So that's it.
Great. Linda and David and Dean, I want to say thank you very much. That did wind up being a little bit more time than I anticipated, but I truly hope for the additional board members that kind of review of where we've been, where we are, and where we may want to go is grist for the mill for what we're about to jump into. So I have just a couple of comments, and pretty soon I'll turn it over to my colleague, John Prince, to lead the board through a much closer look at what goals you would like to have for the Bscc's next 5-year strategic plan. So this is one of my favorite parts, and I always have to acknowledge, I'm not sure if anyone here may know her, maybe Gordon. There was a wonderful woman I worked with at the Judicial Council years ago named Dale Sipes. She died far too young of cancer, but she was really, really great at strategic planning and making it accessible to boards like ours. And the example that she always gave is that the purpose of strategic planning at the highest level, which is what we're on today, is to focus on organizational goals. And those are the big picture, overarching umbrella goals about what this board wants to accomplish over the next 5 years, as opposed to the detailed strategies and objectives that will determine how we get there. So the Dale Sipes example is always, a goal is something like make delicious coffee. That is a goal. And the objectives at the next level of a strategic plan would come later in our strategic planning process. So objectives would get you to the level of determining how to make great coffee and determining what goes into the coffee. So your objectives might have to do with where are you going to source your coffee beans from? What kind of roasting do you want? What water temperature should be used to brew the coffee? What type of cup do you want the coffee served in? All those sorts of things come later. That's just my friendly reminder that we want to keep it at the make great coffee level today. So I believe now we're going to start going through some of the handouts. John, do I have that right? We're going to show the current strategic plan, and I will ask board members if you have any questions right at this moment. I hope you took some notes during the opening panel for things to add to the conversation as we go through, but any process questions right now? Super. All right, John, take it away.
All right, perfect. Thank you. As a reminder, we're going to have these handouts on the screen. So if a board member would like to speak and you're having trouble getting in, definitely use that raise your hand feature so that we can make sure that we tag you, because obviously everybody's not on the screen because we have the full screen being shown right now. So Right now, I just want to reiterate the purpose, of course, is to identify the goals for the next 5 years strategic plan, the 22 to 26 strategic plan. And first, we want to have a starting point, which is look at the previous strategic plan, which was brought again to the board in February. We extended out that strategic plan period. So this was the 2018-2020 strategic plan. It's handout 1 in your materials. And we're not going to go through this particular document, but it is there as well. But we will, as we move forward to the next piece of the plan today, is we're going to go ahead and look at these goals, and we will still use those goals as the jumping off point for where we're going to go for the next 5-year strategic plan. So as an overview for the strategic planning process, you see hopefully here, you'll see that we have, it starts out, and it is a circular process because this process is a never-ending process. Once we get to the end of the strategic plan, obviously we start doing that again. So we start out with the goals. We have stakeholder input, which we did as well. We had input from the staff of the Bscc. We also had a public comment period where we had written public comment period for the public. And unfortunately, we didn't receive any at that time. And obviously, we'll have stakeholder input at the end of this meeting as well. Then after that, the board is going to put together the goals today. We'll move towards the objectives at that point. Once those goals are obtained, once we have those objectives, we will also go back to the stakeholders as well. And we anticipate doing a video stakeholder input or in person if COVID allows, what have you, at that time. Come back to the board, and we will have at that point the board will approve the strategic plan, which will include the goals and objectives, and then we will move forward to the strategies, which is really implementing how do we go through and get to implementing these processes. And then, of course, the results will come as we move forward in time. So today we're going to have an open discussion about the different organizational goals. And if we look at the handout number 3, you'll see, again, we have on the left-hand side, we have the goals that are the current goals. And then on the right-hand side, there are questions that the Bscc staff and management used to come back to the board with what we think might be, and we also think that the board should use to make any changes or edits or what have you for the goals going forward. Let's see. So some of the questions that we considered is this goal relevant? Should the goal be modified or expanded? What are the current events or issues related to this goals? And what are the possible changes needed for this goal to be relevant or applicable to the current responsibilities and authority of the Bscc? So these key questions are what drove, again, the management team and staff to make some changes. And you'll see on this next slide area here, on the left-hand side, you see the current goal, which is decision-making, goal 1, make decisions fairly, inclusively, and transparently. And then the management team and staff looked at those questions, which are going to be also down in the bottom left-hand corner. You can see those as well, so that they remain the top of the mind as we have the discussions. And the recommended updates that the management team put together for goal 1 decision-making was to be goal 1 decision-making and operational transparency, and make decisions and carry out operations fairly, inclusively, collaboratively, and transparently. And again, you can see down below the questions that were considered and some of the applicable answers and items that we looked at. So with that, I want to open this discussion up to the board. If anybody would like to have any specific discussion, you would like to ask about any of the goals, ask about the piece that we're looking at. And again, we're looking at goal 1 here. And look at these questions. Is this goal still relevant? Should this goal be modified or expanded? What are the current events or issues related to the goal? and what are the possible changes that might be needed for this goal to be relevant and applicable to the responsibilities and authority of the Bscc as you're doing these. And Tanya's going to take notes on the right-hand side, so you'll see some of those there. And at the end, we'll bring about any changes that we might see to each individual goal. And then at the end, we will have a period for a new goal or new goals if the board would like. So we'll just go through each of the current goals and then move down to that. So I'd like to open that up if anybody has any comments, discussion items.
Well, I'll start. I like that goal, and I think that should be an ongoing goal. And so make good coffee. I like that. And I guess where I see our changes coming is how we make that coffee down the road.
Just a little bit of further context. John, thank you so much for all of that opening information. You know, when this strategic plan was put together, which, you know, I think we were talking about it in 2017 and it went into effect in 2018. That was very much during the time where we were really rebuilding and putting into the world our stakeholder inclusion process. And so there was a lot of focus on executive steering committees, opening up the, you know, the ability for anybody who might be interested in participating on an ESC to click on the website, submit a statement and all of that. And the focus was more narrowly in those days on decision making. And then it was Yvonne Garner who brought to the team this wonderful terminology that's probably widely used, but I just hadn't heard it put together quite that way. Operational transparency is what's being added. So I think our enhanced inspection process is an outstanding example of operational transparency, where you can see, you know, what goes into our inspection process and what comes out of it. And we're continuing to improve in that way. So to the board members, please feel free to, you know, react, ask questions, suggest additional wording changes or concepts to be woven in here. And we don't want you to feel like you have to, you know, get the wording perfect today. This can be at the conceptual level, and our team will try to come back to you with what that wording might look like, because you're not deciding on these in a final fashion today. We will bring them to the board in June. So what do board members think?
Well, I have a comment, but I've spoken so much, I'm waiting for others.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I can't see everybody.
Go ahead, Norma. Awesome.
I think this is great. The goal, I'm trying to kind of like look ahead, but I think that it sounds like we're on the right track.
Thank you.
So may I ask what are the notes? What's the notes part? I think I missed that.
I think that's where Tanya captured some of the things that David had said during the panel, seeing this as potentially a goal where these concepts could be woven in. So I think the first one is pretty well addressed in the draft goal language. Maintain focus on inclusivity. We see that right there. So not sure, David, if that was, oh, good. I see Chief Mills has his hand up as well. But David had mentioned, you know, maybe there's a way that strategic goals can address something about responding to criticism. So David, would you like to go next, and then Chief Mills?
I have like a grammar comment, which is the title says decision-making and operational transparency, but it's all about transparency, inclusiveness. I mean, it's sort of limiting in the title, but not in the text. I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
I think you are, but say a little bit more, because in my view, like the sub part should explain what we mean at the top line level. Tell me what you see as missing or whatever it is.
It's just that, you know what, I'm going to leave it alone. I think I'm slicing it too thin here. Let's hear what others say.
Okay, Chief Mills.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I like how it's written. I think that you're certainly on the right track, and it's pretty broad, and so you are making coffee. I guess I would challenge what we mean by inclusivity. And us to think more broadly about having more people at the table. And my limited experience here on the board, it is oftentimes advocates and people who genuinely care about, and rightfully so, about how we treat incarcerated and formerly incarcerated persons. But I think that we're missing an important segment of the greater community, one of which is victims. And so how do we incorporate that into a restorative justice model as part of our larger goal making? And I think that affects some of the other goals as well. So I would just challenge us to think maybe a little bit more broadly about inclusivity and what that means.
Great. I see Tanya putting those notes in. Further define inclusivity, victims and others, and incorporate that into a restorative justice model. Other thoughts from board members?
Couldn't
Yes.
all that Andy just suggested be done in terms of the objectives and so on, rather than hacking up the goal statement?
Yes, yes, I think that's indeed possible. Chief Zuniga.
I just want to say that I agree with Chair Penner when she mentioned that this should be probably an ongoing goal of the board. I come from a point where I was involved when it was still BOC and then CSA, and what we have now is far better, and our stakeholders continue to feel heard, and I think we need to continue to make this a goal.
Thank you. Other board members can feel free to jump right in, like John said, since we can't see everyone on the screen. Just speak up if you have a thought or comment. And I also want to remind everyone that, and I feel like Norma was kind of asking this question, the strategic planning process is iterative in nature. So we'll come back and look at all the goals again at the end, because you may find that some of the things you're thinking about now fit within another goal. And I don't want you to think that if we move on to goal 2 now, you won't have the chance to revisit goal 1.
And I also want to make sure that, you know, I bring forward that, you know, the objectives piece is good for us to get in notes as well right now. Like you mentioned, you know, defining the inclusivity and who might be brought forward, so that when we do move forward, we know what the board is driving for. So it is good to, like I say, we want to focus on the high level goals, but if we know some of the objectives that we want us to move forward with as well, we'll definitely make notes and make sure that those are brought forward at the next step too. So if we don't have any additional comments, we can move forward to the next goal. All right, seeing none. So the next goal, the current goal 2 is programs, training, and technical assistance and support practices and policies shown to reduce recidivism and improve justice system outcomes for individuals and families. And the management team recommendations and staff recommendations for this change is that the top level stay the same, but then the change in the wording below to be align Bscc programs and responsibilities to support innovation, reduce recidivism, and improve outcomes for individuals and families. And again, down below, you can see in the green some of the questions that we asked when we were looking at these revisions. Namely, we were looking at this goal and seeing whether or not this goal was too aspirational, and how could we rephrase this to align with Bscc functions better. This concept of, you know, should the reduce recidivism, is that still needing this goal, and should we have any additional sub goals in this statement? So I'd like to open this up if anybody has any comments or suggestions. Again, looking at these key questions, consider when we are moving forward.
Do you mind sharing the logic or reasoning of why taking out the justice system component when reference to individuals and families?
Katie, do you want to take that or do you want me to give it a shot?
Unmuting. Yes, thank you, John. And I think that was Guillermo asking the question. At the conversation we had at the management team level, it was an interest in upping the elevation even higher. So justice system outcomes felt a little bit too narrow, because some of our work in the recent years focuses on things like grants that are, the youth reinvestment grant would come to mind. So diversion programs that are providing services to people before, entering, quote unquote, the criminal legal system. So just having a broader view of improving outcomes was the concept.
Well, I'm kind of on Guillermo's side a little bit in terms of keeping justice system in there. I think diversion grants are justice system grants, for example.
Mm-hmm.
We're not about foster care so much, or child care or other outcomes. I kind of like the cross out justice system language.
Okay.
That was struck, just sort of.
Yeah, well, this is exactly what we want today's meeting to be about. Let's look at, how you, the board members, want to say it. It's really important. So yeah, I think Tanya's capturing the note. I'm hearing some sense. Let's listen to other comments as well, but maybe justice system should stay in the goal statement. Sheriff Groudon?
Yeah, I agree with Dave, because if you look, because nothing in the supporting the title really has to do anything with the training in the header, I guess, other than the justice system, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It seems more related to programs. It seems pretty strictly related to programs with justice system removed. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think by making it so broad, it really weakens the statement, in my opinion.
Very good. Other thoughts from the board?
Is there anything that you would like to see us include in this statement or goal that you don't see there right now as well?
I don't know. I'd almost like to see us include something, I keep going back to the training piece, but it does seem real focused on programs, and obviously an important part of improving outcomes is improving, the professionalism of the staff assigned to work in those facilities. So it'd be good. I think it would be good to incorporate something there on advancing, professionalism, or I don't know.
I like that. Advancing professionalism is a great concept. I think that was in the training arena more so than grants, Tanya.
I was just going to suggest a quickie edit that would say align Bscc programs, training and other responsibilities.
Ooh, nice. I like that. It's at the beginning of the statement, Tanya. Yeah, align, programs, training.
Programs, training and other responsibilities.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah, that's a good one, huh, Sheriff Groudon? Yep, great.
All right, any additional comments or edits that the board would like to see at this point? And again, once we're done with this meeting here and we've gone through public comment and what have you, we will also send these around to the board again. Obviously, some of the board members could not make it today. So there may be additional changes or questions that'll come about, and those will be sent through email, and we will derive hopefully a great product at that point as well. So this is not the last time to make any comments or suggestions either. All right, go ahead and move on to goal number 3. So goal number 3, the current goal is facilities and alternatives to incarceration, maximize successful reentry and public safety by promoting the use of alternatives to incarceration and local and adult and juvenile detention facilities. The suggested edits are that we change this goal to state only facilities and reentry services, and that the subpart be provide increased accountability and transparency regarding jail inspections and improve access to reentry resources in county facilities. And again, some of the questions that we asked down below as well.
Yeah, well, it's not just about jail inspections. You mean county facility or county detention inspections? You limited it to adults.
Okay. Is there a specific wording you'd like to say instead of regarding jail inspections, David?
You could say regarding county facility inspections or jail and juvenile or adult and juvenile facility inspections. But I do think it needs to be inclusive, especially since that function is staying for the time being at Bscc.
Okay.
We're saying detention and reentry facilities.
And there's something else that gets me about, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in, that gets me about this, because while it is completely commendable to improve access to reentry resources in county facilities, what about improving access to reentry resources everywhere, or improving links to community? I mean, I'm not able to reduce it to a statement, but this seems too limiting in terms of the and improve part of it.
If we took off the word facilities at the end of that statement, it would be inspections improve access to reentry resources in counties. Would that incorporate what you're speaking on?
It'd be better. Improved access to reentry. I want to say like reentry and rehabilitation resources, or Norma, come on, I'm looking for help.
And Chair Penner, I just wanted to note that Secretary Allison has joined us. Thank you, Kathy, for being here.
I've been on for a while, but for whatever reason, nobody could see me. And I got on right as John was starting his intro on this.
Terrific.
So I have had a few comments and I haven't been able to make them, but I think they've been covered.
Please jump in if you want to go back to anything, though. We'd love to hear it.
Well, I was just going to ask, and I think it's been covered, but I got disconnected and then reconnected somehow. But when you talk about reentry and monitoring facilities, when we talk about not just jail, so adult and juveniles, and okay, any reentry, you got it right there, reentry facilities. Okay, I see that it's there now. Because is there an opportunity for the counties to have their own reentry facilities outside of the jail space that the Bscc would be responsible to monitor?
So at least from our perspective, when we put some people in residential treatment facilities that are non-custodial and they're not subject to Bscc, but some of the bigger counties do have, you know, like honor farms or reentry facilities, or like a work furlough facility where that would be, I think they do count as local detention facilities, I believe.
Well, one of the ways we really accomplish this goal is, the adult reentry grant, the juvenile reentry that we've done. I mean, by facilitating that money going out to counties and ensuring that it's happening across the state. So I think, while we don't touch those facilities on an inspection sort of level, we are working hard to make sure money is pushed out to the locals for ongoing reentry.
I think if you all bear with me, but I'm getting a little confused here on what we're trying to do with this goal. Because it started by, if we read what was there before, it's not targeted toward inspections alone. It's about all those things that promote the use of reentry or transitional services rather than incarceration. And then somehow we end up with a statement that's about inspections. So I'm a little, it happens often, and sometimes I get lost, but is this the same goal?
No, I agree with you. I think we need, it looks to me like we're trying to cram two totally separate things into one goal. I think we should, with all the focus on the inspections, I think we should probably have the inspections as its own goal.
Yeah.
And then move the alternative to incarceration, or the, reentry and programming, sort of its, I think we need two different goals here.
I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. I've always struggled with this goal because it is two disparate things. Norma, you looked like you were about to say something.
Oh, I was just looking at my other paper to see where that goal would go, and I was just looking at that last page, that maybe it should go right there where I'm looking ahead, and it says new goal ? And I was wondering I don't know if you wanted to jump ahead and like maybe pop in something about the inspections there, or if we're going to wait till the end and pop it in then.
We can do it either way. I guess I would just like to do a little quick check for consensus. Is there, and people would need to just jump up if they wanted to have a counterpoint, but is there consensus on the board that you would like this to be split out into two different goals? So speak up if you want to disagree, I guess is what I'm saying. Okay, this feels like a really good idea. So there would be a goal on reentry and alternatives to incarceration, and there would be a goal that, one of the things, putting on my strategic planning hat a little bit better, we should have a strategic goal around inspections. The point of a strategic plan isn't just to write down all the big responsibilities that we have. It's to think strategically about what are the goals in connection with inspection. So why don't we just put a bookmark there, and John, well, I'll leave it to you, sort of as our facilitator, if you want to branch off now and talk about an inspections related goal, or wait till we finish with new 3 and 4 and then.
Well, I think right now would be a good time for us to figure out how we want to split this out, because before we move on, because we are going to take a part of the current goal 3 and move it into a new goal 5, so we can have goal 3 be the facilities and inspections, and goal 5 be reentry services, or vice versa, however you choose to do so. Right. But I think it's a good time, because then we can see all the wording all at once, and and make sure we're not duplicating too much on there. So if we want to focus, and so that we don't have too much deviation away from what the current goal 3 is, if we then make goal 3 focus more on facilities and inspections, and we'll make goal 5 be more on that reentry services and alternatives to incarceration, if that's okay with the board. Not hearing any objection. So
yep, I see.
That might be a 4, and then data and collecting might go into 5 Just-
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would
that's
agree, David.
perfectly.
And
Mhm.
I have another comment on 3, because I had a line I wanted to add that now becomes germane in my mind. So I'm just going to spit it out. So I thought that that it should be more global. And here was my goal 3 at this point, which would be to promote the safety and adequate care of detained individuals through standards, inspections, and other activities. So that the goal is the result for people who are detained. The method is inspections and standards and so on. So I'm just throwing that out there, even if it's confusing. I'll even put it in chat so somebody can.
Thank you. That'd be appreciated.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And are there any other keywords or hot items that anybody would like to see when we're formulating this new goal 3 for facilities and inspections? Norma?
I don't know. I mean, I think it would go here, but I'm not sure how to articulate it. So I'm going to take my cue from David and just.
Well, look, I don't know if it works as a subject. There.
I'm just going to throw it out there, a la David. But I think that there's been. I mean, I was listening to what everybody was talking about, and as you all know, I've been to a few of the inspections, and I think that there's something that can really. It's something very small, but I think it can really go far with how things are with the Bscc and inspections. And by that, I mean talking to people who are incarcerated more than what's happening now. So I don't know if that would go here, if you could just put it as a note. And I do mean pulling people and talking to them. I know that too, but I also mean walking into a room and greeting people who are incarcerated the same way you would greet the staff there. So I don't know if we could just put that as a note.
Well, yeah, and we just had our in-person inspection. I know that happens with our field rep, but either way, and just one note from me on the promote safety and adequate care. I think it's important that, we want a safe facility for the people that we house there, but we also want a safe facility for the staff. And I really think, obviously, if you have a well-run facility and the inmates are getting the care they need, it tends to be safer for staff, but I think it might be worth mentioning in there.
And Norma, to your point, this is Katie speaking. I think one of the things that's very beneficial about a fresh look at our strategic plan is to be very specific about what those goals are. And I know that our inspections team, if they were here, would say, oh, we absolutely do that routinely, talk to people who are there in a very structured and consistent way. But I also acknowledge the fact that questions keep coming up about that. So we should write it down. We should put it in the plan, and we should even state it more explicitly as a part of the process. So I just want to support what you're saying and say, as Sheriff Groudon just mentioned, that it is very consistent with the current, goals and values of our inspection process.
Yes. And I think that the staff do a wonderful job. The more I get to know them, the more I see how much hard work they do. I absolutely agree. And I absolutely agree that our institutions, our prisons, our jails, that it is a concern that everyone is safe, staff and the people inside.
Right.
So
For sure.
that's absolutely. And I think that this is something that's not big, but it means a lot. And being someone who's formerly incarcerated, you look for those things. You look when people are walking through, like, are they friendly to me? Are they making eye contact with me? Are they talking to me? And that means a lot. And the outcome may not be what you want, but you were respected when they went in there, and that means a lot.
And that's what you're describing is so 100% consistent with procedural fairness, which is also a concept we've been touching on today. So yeah, I really like that. I like the whole feel and flavor of that conversation.
I think really what you're getting at is the expression of what we said in a prior goal about inclusivity and that whole process. And
Good
so
point.
what you're getting at is these are the ways in which we show that first value. When we do inspections, we also value the input. It's part of our decision making, the folks that are incarcerated, and all these other ways in which we include folks.
Mhm.
Yeah, and if we don't state it, we're minimizing what's actually happening out there. So I think it's important to put it in.
So could I just ask that the language I put in chat be added to the notes just for reference?
Yes, I
Just copy
think
and
that's it there in the
Oh,
where the cursor is. Yeah.
little tiny letters.
They're teeny tiny.
Yeah.
Teeny.
Tanya, if you move that up to the subpart instead, and so remove the subpart that's listed there and move that into its place. And then if we incorporate Sheriff Groudon's piece about staff as well, so adequate care of detained individuals, I would say, and either detention staff or staff, however you all think would be best worded. And see, take that to the board and see if anybody would like to see any additional changes or wording or anything else to add to this.
Yeah, it just seems the main thing is the safety of staff, and as well as the state safety and needs of the. Sorry, I can't see it all. It's behind my people bar. But obviously, we don't provide services per se to staff. Main thing is just promoting a safe environment for staff and meeting the needs of.
Yep.
Something like that.
We'll definitely play with the language, Sheriff Groudon. I do think it's distinct. I think it's, of course, we're talking about safety for everybody, but I'd like there to be a substatement about the people who are incarcerated and a substatement about the people who work in the facility, as two sub thoughts.
I'm
Yeah,
with you.
thanks. Okay, and then reentry services. Well, I guess we should pause here. Is there understanding that we'll fine tune the sub language a little bit on what's now new goal 3, facilities and inspections. Any other comments or input or suggestions from the board? Okay. And then I certainly agreed with David. We would want to make reentry services would become new goal 4. It sort of fits in the flow that way, and we'll have the data part be new goal 5. But on reentry services, is that top line title? I mean, there are a lot of grant related services that I think are so beneficial that are, on other kind of parts of the continuum of services beyond reentry. Again, like diversion and Prop 47, substance use disorder treatment, mental health treatment. So it's
I agree. So where are we going to put the alternative incarceration piece?
Yeah, I feel like that should be maybe along with this reentry service title, alternatives to incarceration.
Because depending on how you look at reentry, that's super broad. I mean, it's anything you're doing, whether incarcerated or upon release, that helps promote, success and reduce recidivism. So a lot of that reentry services starts with the programming in the jail and so on. I know we did programs in the prior goal, so we don't have to address that, but the alternative to incarceration is a pretty big piece of reentry.
It's the diversion and transitional services, right? Those are all captured within. I mean,
anything that keeps them out of custody would be alternative to incarceration.
Maybe we just leave that the title, alternatives, excuse me, alternatives to incarceration.
I struggle a little bit with the definition of alternatives to incarceration. I want a little clarity there, because when I see that goal, I like to now tell me what the Bscc does that
Yeah.
offers alternatives to incarceration. I mean, it's a great term, but how are we accomplishing that? Are we doing it through grants and other, you know, reentry is the other side of incarceration. So they may be cousins, but they're not twins. So I would like to discuss that a little bit.
Is it even in the core role of Bscc?
I was trying to think of where it is we touch that specific topic. I mean, I don't want to put something out there that's not really on point of what we do within our agency. So when the staff looked at it, what was it that they were discussing?
Well, so it was a little bit of a what was the term that we used? Oh yeah, that it was so aspirational that it didn't feel connected to, you know, our current set of responsibilities. But I think the fact that we've been able to split out facilities, this begins to make it more clear. And I think, Linda, the alternatives to incarceration that we have responsibility for are mostly in our grant making functions.
Yeah, I think that, and then technical expertise, you know, if a county's having problems with population numbers, they might reach out to your field reps and ask about, you know, options to reduce or manage their population. But most of ours, yeah, it's all like, you know, electronic monitoring, we're furlough, sheriff's parole, SWAT, sheriff's work alternative, all those programs that really aren't touched by Bscc.
And that's kind of what I'm reacting to, because in my last career was very different than, I mean, I just see us using the term, we do programming in our grant making process, but when I try to take that term and apply it to what we do, it doesn't seem to be the best fit, but I'm willing to yield to the wisdom of the group.
But I mean, I still have the same question. In a very sort of direct way, will Bscc be promoting the use of alternatives to incarceration for diversion via grants as part of its core mission?
Yeah, and not to be confused with, I heavily believe in alternatives to incarceration, but do we have a vehicle to move that goal somewhere in our purview?
And I would say that this is part of the reason why I think it was removed when we were having our discussions, because there was no clear driver of that, other than it was an aspirational goal at the time. I don't know if Ricardo's on and can speak to that or not, but I don't think that there was something that we, if I remember the discussion clearly in management, that was the reason why that was taken out, is because there wasn't a driver of that.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm definitely here. Yeah, I think you've accurately captured kind of the sentiment. And, you know, to Linda's point, and I know many of you have served on our executive steering committees, we absolutely, you know, try to, as the grant of the legislation allows for it, to support, you know, reentry practices, you know, to support alternatives to incarceration. But I wouldn't say we have a blanket mandate by any stretch of the imagination. It's, you know, we try to incorporate, you know, best practices, promising practices, things of that nature. But I don't know that we could say definitively that we mandate or require alternatives to incarceration. So, you know, similar to Linda, absolutely agree and support it. But I think we may come into some practical challenges unless there's some additional guidance down the road in terms of how exactly we would go about making that a tenet of all of our grant programs if we go down this road.
So is it because all of those were youth grants? I mean, you certainly had a number of these grants that were specific to divert folks away from youth from the justice system. Are we saying that now, you know, with the split of some of those functions, this would no longer be part of a goal for Bscc?
No, this is Katie. I don't think so, Guillermo, because our Prop 47 grant is a very significant grant delivering, mental health treatment and substance use disorder treatment, adult reentry. Linda's spoken about that a couple of times. So we definitely have grants that pretty directly support this, but I think we've already touched on. And Tanya, could I ask you to just turn back to the goal 2 page for a second? Thank you. There we go. So we have a goal called Programs, Training, and Technical Assistance. Maybe the task becomes weaving, maybe you don't need a new 4 if we can have an expansive enough substatement of, having excellent programs, training, and TA.
And those, and like Prop 47 that you mentioned, and to me, that goes back to the word diversion instead of alternatives to incarceration. Diversion is a broader term than alternatives to incarceration. I start to think of those specific things that are for like population reductions of detention facilities. When you use the term diversion, it sort of fits better into that whole sort of grant scheme of trying to incentivize a certain type of behavior.
Yeah, and in my experience at the county level, the diversion typically happens at that court level, where most of the alternative to incarceration occur at either probation or sheriff's, the jail level, or some partnership thereof. But I agree with Katie. I think the alternative to incarceration fits better here because you have the technical assistance to help agencies manage their population. Plus, they're all some type of, every type of alternative has, almost all have some form of programming. So I think it fits better here too.
And I'm going to chime in and agree that I like the idea of scratching the attempt to have an all-encompassing new goal and going to objectives under programs. Programs is a nice sort of banner for things we're talking about. And I think it can be done better here.
Works better for you too, I'm assuming, Linda. You comfortable with this?
She's muted.
I just feel like it speaks, we can make goals that I think we should be held accountable for.
Exactly.
And so we don't want to make them lofty or the word
outside of our wheelhouse, right?
And I think we're doing a lot of things, but I like the way this is going.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Tanya. So then back to the goal 3 page. Maybe we don't need new goal 4. That's the consensus, right?
Yeah, I vote for putting reentry and alternatives and whatever else, community service.
Yeah, please leave it there, Tanya, and strike out, just so we have the record that we were kind of playing around with it and then landed somewhere else. Cool. All right, anything else on this new goal 3, facilities and inspections? And I think we have enough content here to figure out what to pull into goal 2 to have it cover everything that it needs to.
Before we move on, does anybody want to take a shot at goal 2, including, are there specific words you want to pull in about reentry services and diversion into that goal before we move on to goal 4?
Good idea. Looking to you,
Are those
brilliant
words,
board members.
reentry and diversion, just, those words, would you just like those put in here such that they make sense? Is there additional verbiage that you would like?
Yeah, keywords with that, John, I'm not hearing a, specific additional direction from the board. So let's play around with the draft. Again, reminding everyone that this is an iterative process and we'll come back to you, with your ideas. But yeah, I like what you've done there, Tanya, keywords.
And just to piggyback, I think goal 2 is a good umbrella as it is and allows for a list of specifics to follow.
Yeah, great.
Okay. All right, so we'll work on some way to properly incorporate that so that it makes sense and put those couple words in there. And again, like we will pass that around to the board as well. So with that, we will move on to goal 4. And this is, again, the last goal that we currently have. And of course, we'll have openings for any additional goals after this. So the original goal was data collection and reporting. That will stay the same. The only change that was recommended was that instead of analyze, the verbiage be changed to collect and provide justice system data that inform effective policy and practice decisions.
I just want to say thank you, because the one change I made in the materials was to put the word collect in there. So whoopee.
All right. Great minds.
The only other thing I can think of is that the data collection and reporting should be able to support outcome measures, but I don't know if you want to tackle that additionally.
One thing I'm curious about that's come up in the conversation a couple times today is I'd like to hear from the board if you would like us to attempt to note, having resources on best practices as part of our strategic plan. It would definitely have resource implications, like many board members have mentioned, but that's something, that we have sort of had as something we would like to do more of, but don't presently have the resources to do. So I just toss that out for further conversation.
It certainly makes sense to support the counties, in particular smaller counties, with some best practice ideas. So it certainly makes sense to do that when they've been identified and properly vetted.
Yeah, I totally agree. With the amount of turnover we're having, jail managers and stuff, it's nice to have some resources. But really, I know that comes up with the Senate rules every time, confirmation rolls around. They're always asking about that topic. So it's, and really, if we want to help the counties, it's best that we have information readily available for them that'll help them.
So just taking a quick shot at this, if we were to incorporate best practices here, if we said collect and provide justice system data and best practices or best practice information or best practices that inform effective policy and practice decisions. Does that, I never saying practice twice in there, but
yeah, that looks good to me. Board members? Gordon, did you have a thought? You're on mute, Gordon.
Yeah,
Oh, there you
I was trying to get to the button.
Okay, cool.
The short answer is no.
Okay.
That I needed to talk about. I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm really digesting a lot of stuff. So thank you. Thank you for asking, though.
Sure.
So the only concern I have maybe is just about the best practices. If a program is successful in one jurisdiction, it might not mean it's the best practice. It's just successful program. So I don't know.
I hear you. No,
Just
that's
the terminology.
It's a really important point.
You know, also I thought the best practice reference could go under the technical assistance piece of one of the earlier goals.
That's true.
So would the board like to see the best practices piece move up to, I believe it's goal 2, the training technical assistance, or did you want to include that in 2 and maybe put some additional or different verbiage in here? Talking about, policies or programs, effective programs, maybe here or something like that to incorporate in this, or should we move the best practices, look at that on goal 2?
I agree with Dave. I think we move it. Fits better with technical assistance.
I agree with that too, Sheriff. Because we can really develop, again, keeping this at the big picture overarching, we really could build a very robust and meaningful, new set of objectives related to data collection and reporting. There's so much that, has been touched on, even like our jail profile survey, juvenile detention profile survey. I mean, there's much to do in the data collection and reporting arena. And I think best practices does, as a function, fit better with this goal 2 set of activities.
Okay, so when we're incorporating the reentry and diversion, we'll look at how to incorporate that best practices in this as well.
Great, super.
All right, back to goal 4. Is there any other comments or discussion? Anybody look at the goal and see if there's any major changes that you want? Does everything look good there? Just opening it up to everybody.
Yeah, John, just this is Andy. One comment. I didn't know that we struck out analyze, but it still doesn't make sense to me. Because if you just collect data and then provide the justice system the data, there needs to be some level of analysis if we're gonna problem solve. And I know that we are not specifically responsible to problem solve, but others are. And so if we're collecting the data, there needs to be some level of analysis. Now that may affect the staffing at Bscc, because we'll need to have an analyst do that. And it also affects the ability to provide the technical assistance that we had just talked about in identifying those best practices, which probably should say best evidence-based practices, because there's a lot of people that tout their best practices, but it wasn't validated in some way, especially from an academic perspective.
Well, that's easily addressed by just saying collect, analyze, and provide, I guess.
Yeah, and I think where the rubber meets the road is in what we determine to be the objectives and the strategies, the perceptions that have been reflected. For one example, in the audit report about, the Bscc should be doing all of these other things with information that comes in, for example, on community corrections partnership surveys. We have not had the ability to, nor did we have any direction, statutorily or from the governor or legislature or anything to say, yeah, Bscc, you should be out there saying this county, what county should be doing. So I do want to reflect that the suggested deletion of the word analyze on the part of the management team was to have our data collection and reporting goal be a little bit more accurately tailored to that data warehouse concept from, those of you who've been around since 2012 will remember. That's not to say that we don't do any analysis of data, but, you know, our primary function on data collection and reporting has been to pull data together and make it available on our website. So we might just want to further fine tune the language, and I'm interested in hearing if board members have any reaction or additional thoughts based on what I've just said.
Hold on here.
We hear you, Linda.
Okay. You know, Katie, I totally agree. We get ourselves in trouble because this, as it reads, it's just not what we actually can do. And we tend to get a great deal of criticism because we aren't, you know, we can't compel people to give us all the data that I think other states are able to get, and we're not staffed to do, you know, the deep dive, I think, and so we don't want to create the expectation and the goal.
That may be true. Then why would we provide technical assistance if we have not understood the data?
Yeah, good point, Chief. Yep.
Circle
I mean,
around.
I think we're going to probably come back with some slightly, you know, limiting language of to the extent possible, you know, or something like that. But, you know, this is a strategic plan, so it should reflect what we want to stretch and reach for, while at the same time being in some kind of zone called realistic. That's where I get a little bit, you know, unsure. Other thoughts? I hear board members still wanting something about analyze in this goal. Am I reading you right?
You've already committed to it, I think, in sort of a passive way when you say justice system data that inform effective policy and practice, right? So that the fact that's an aspirational statement, which tells me you've done something with the information.
And I'm okay with leaving analyze out given the way the discussion has gone.
Well, I really appreciate Guillermo's point just now. That's a good point. If you are providing data that inform effective policy and practice, then you are doing some sort of analysis. So, all right. Strike it out again.
In, out.
So the hard part, a lot of the technical assistance from at the field rep level is, you know, it's more like informal. It's not, it's what they've seen or what they've, you know, what they've seen be successful in addressing an issue in their facility or a facility. And I don't know what I imagine when you're talking about, I know we're on data collection rather than the promising programs or whatever else. What I'd like to, you know, I think even if you just have a catalog of the type of program, and I know I'm going way off here, but just for, you know, even just a catalog of the different types of programs that jurisdictions host in their facilities, then that agency, if they have an interest in that area, they can reach out to that specific facility. So it's not, a lot of the information isn't real technical. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And the Bscc has done that. It's been a long time, but when I was new here at the Bscc, we had done a huge inventory of program information from across the state. I just want to be mindful of the time. My goodness, it's already 3:56. We had intended to wrap this up in about 2 hours, but I do not want to you know, cut any of this conversation short. This is really, really helpful. Chair Penner, I think just there's no, like, it's okay for us to go longer than the 4 o'clock hour, assuming board members are okay with staying on for a while longer.
You have to leave at 4. Just
David, you do? Okay. Well, with that, and Norma, you have to go as well? Okay, cool. Well, why don't we?
I think if I had my way, and I don't have to be anywhere at 4, I think 2 hours is in a session is plenty for everybody remotely. And let me ask this, in terms of percentages, where are we? in terms of completion?
We are done with what we had planned to go through. We certainly would want to open it up to say, did people have thoughts based on, what you've considered coming into today, as well as what you've heard today for new additional goal statements? And then we would want to call for public comment.
Yeah.
I don't think Adam has anybody in the queue. Is that correct, Adam?
That's correct. No one has emailed me yet, but we do have 8 attendees that we could ask to raise their hands if they would like to make a public comment.
Okay. So Linda, how would you like to proceed?
Well,
I think before we, sorry, just to cut in, before we open up to public comment, I would like to piggyback on what Katie had said. If any board members has any ideas or any things that you want brought to the meeting, or any of these discussions brought forward for a possible additional goal, if you want to, if it's something quick and you want to, say that now, we can definitely do that. Or you can also send an email to myself or Adam, and then we can pass that around to management as well. So I'll just want to open it up real quick, just to back to the board, if anybody has anything that you want to bring forward for a possible new goal, and then send it back to Linda. Sorry, Linda.
that's all right. I asked a leading question. Remember the person.
I don't see any hands and nobody's speaking up, so I'm going to assume at this point that we're good on any new goal. And again, if you have anything or anything pops up in your mind as you're looking at the discussions as we send these back out, definitely send that to myself, and we'll go ahead and send that back around to the board as well. So I'll send that back now to Linda.
All right. Katie, as you wish. So you tell me.
Yeah, I think I'd really like to thank John and Tanya for all of the work that they put into preparing for today and leading us through the conversation. Really enjoyed the opening panel as well. I would like to just let you know that we will put together a new updated set of draft goal statements. And we'll still have we will have the opportunity at our June board meeting to talk through. And so perhaps now, Chair Penner, we should see if anybody would like to make public comment to give further input into the goals.
Yes. So thank you, board. Anybody in the audience wishing to make public comment, please contact Adam through the prescribed instructions.
Yes, anyone could email public comment at bscc.ca.gov. If we missed you, you could still submit a written comment. Those on the line, all you have to do is raise your hand and we'll call out your name if you have a public comment.
I am not seeing any, Adam.
Yeah, and I don't have any on my queue, so.
All right. Then I think we go to the next step, which is adjourn.
All right. I really do want to just say thank you again. I think we made excellent use of this 2-hour block. Thank you very, very much, Chair Penner and board, for a really helpful and, forward-looking conversation.
Got it. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Bye all.
See
Thank
ya.
you. Bye.